All right, well, good evening, everyone, and welcome to our November open mic night, Ecological Pest Management with Dr. Cerruti Hooks with the University of Maryland. And I'll let him get a more extensive introduction about all the work that he's involved with, because he's here, there, and everywhere. But we're lucky to have him here in Upper Marlboro, and he's down at the education and research facility off of 202 that you all probably see when you're going up and down 202. Also want to thank Miss Linda Jones. For those of you who are on virtually or listening to the recording, we had a great seed swap tonight. So we want to thank Miss Linda Jones for planning that. And then we'll be joined after Dr. Hooks by Miss Dr. Julie Wolf, actually, with the Department of the Environment. She is the program manager for the Climate-Smart Commodities Grant, so she'll be giving us a little bit more information about that program and has some flyers to share. So without further ado, while I get your slides loaded up, Dr. Hooks, please come on up.
Well, the first I started about, you don't have to call me Dr. Hooks, definitely not Dr. Cerruti. I mean, even the students just call me Cerruti, so I'm really laid back. Many people don't even know I have a PhD, and I like it that way. The good thing about that is that if you have a PhD and people know it, when you make a mistake or you do something dumb, they really like to get on you. But anyway, I have a master's degree in weed science, and my PhD is in entomology, so I do research in both areas. Nice. And I work with agronomic crops, so most of my research is with vegetable crops. Basically, this presentation, I'll tell you a little bit what I do, but it's basically try to look at non-chemical ways to control insects, weeds, and also nematodes.
Oh, you know what, Dr. Hooks, I forgot to give you this, and then I'm gonna switch the.
Can you lower the light a little?
Yes, we're gonna lower the light. I thought Jason, can you?
Maybe both of you try.
Oh.
Hey, is that better?
Yes. Yeah. It's weird, my mouse disappeared, so I'm trying to put it back in presentation mode. Okay, there we go. I'm gonna stop touching it now.
What's the R squared for?
Really right. No, I shouldn't tell you my real middle names, but you're allowed.
So you may have to speak up just a hair.
Okay, where's the speaker here?
It's see
Yes,
the
it's the
owl
owl.
in the middle, and for those of you who are near the owl, it's very sensitive, so just letting you know it picks up a lot.
So today I'm gonna be talking about ecological pest management, and it's gonna be more of a concept than talking about specific pests. So I'll start off by saying like football, volleyball, tennis, baseball, all of these sporting events are complex games of strategy and tactics. So the strategy that you utilize if you're in a sporting event is typically based on what the type of the sport is, proficiency of the coach, as well as the skill level of the teams. Stuff.
Uh-oh, did it stop working?
Of course.
All right, let me see if I can advance for you. Stuff for me too. Sorry, this is great.
Okay. So when I think about a sporting event that mimics pest management, and when I say pest, I'm talking about whether it's weeds, insects, or disease, I think about boxing. So then that brings me to my outline today. So that's what I'm going to talk about. I'll talk about boxing. I'm going to talk about ecological pest management, which we call EPM. I'm going to talk about different tactics, give some true life research examples, and then I'll end by talking about some of the advantages and limitations of EPM. So the expectation after this presentation is one, that you be a better boxer, but most important, you have a greater knowledge of EPM. So, as promised, I'm going to first talk about boxing. So boxing involves getting the upper hand of your opponent, so to speak. It has to do with skills and trainings. You have to know your limitation as a boxer. But most important, you have to have a thorough understanding of your opponent. So when we think about boxer, we can sort of classify them into four different groups. You have the inside fighter or swarmer. This is the person who's really aggressive and relentless. He stays in the face of his opponent. You have the outside fighter. He's more of a master of defense and offense. He more utilized strategy. Then you have the brawler. The brawler has a good chin, which means he can take a punch without being knocked out. But a brawler typically has a lot of power, and he relies on that power, one punch to take out his opponent. And then you have the hybrid. The hybrid is kind of a mixture of these. He has the grace of outside fighter, but he has the power of a slugger. But the idea is that you sometimes have to tweak your strategy, because no matter which one of these boxers you are, if you're in that ring and it's not working, you have someone in the corner yelling instruction, telling you to change up your fighting style. But the ultimate goal is to beat the target opponent. So I'm going to talk about a match that happened many years ago. And this was a heavyweight championship boxing match between Muhammad Ali, who was the champion at the time on the left, and then you had George Foreman, up and coming boxer, Olympic champ. And they called this fight the Romo in the Jungle because it occurred in Africa. Now, George Foreman was considered a brawler. He relied on his power punch, and he was basically knocking everyone who stepped in the ring with him. Then you have Ali. Some people may say Ali is more of a hybrid, but I kind of think of him as an outside fighter. But he was more of a showboater. So before this fight, this is what everyone predicted the outcome was going to be. That Foreman was going to knock Ali out. And like I said, Ali was a bragger. He used to always talk about what he was going to do in the ring. He always says his face was so pretty, is why he's not going to let anyone hit him. But before this fight, he was very quiet. And people thought that Ali was quiet because even he knew he was going to lose this fight. But Ali knew something, what we call Achilles heel. And Achilles heel is a small problem or weakness in a being or system that can result in its failure. And he thought that he knew the Achilles heels of George Foreman. So later, when I thought about it, I said, maybe he was quiet because he talked so much, he thought he may tell the strategy by mistake. But what was George Foreman Achilles heel? He was a slugger, had a lot of power. He would knock people out first, second, third round. Ali knew this. So Ali said, you know what? If I can just get past those rounds, George is going to tire. Because he doesn't have, he doesn't have that stamina. So basically what he did the rope-a-dope. As soon as he saw George Foreman start to tire out, he went in for the knockout. So the central theme of boxing is, again, thorough understanding your opponent. You find their Achilles heel in the ring, and you exploit that. So now let's switch gears and talk about EPM. I'm sure no one is here to hear me talk about boxing. So first, before defining EPM, I'm going to define IPM. So IPM is a pest management approach that integrates all control tools, and you apply ecological principles to control the pest. So basically, it's a holistic approach. You use everything in your toolbox. Now, when we think about ecological pest management, it's a pest management approach that relies on ecological principles and our knowledge of pests and their interaction with crops and other organisms to manage them. It's basically a preventive tactic. So EPM is sort of a part of IPM, but IPM uses a more holistic approach, and EPM basically relies on what you know about the ecology of that pest, and you try to prevent them from damaging your crops. So what's the central theme of EPM? It's a thorough understanding of pest ecology in relation to their host plant and the environment. You learn their Achilles heel or weak links in the pest seasonal life cycle, and then you modify your farming practice to exploit those weaknesses. So you notice something here? The central theme of EPM is very much like the central theme of boxing. So now you know I'm not crazy. That's why I was talking about boxing. And let's compare them. I can even compare you and show you that they're similar. So in boxing, you have to have a thorough understanding of your opponents in the ring. EPM, thorough understanding of pest behavior in relation to the cropping system. So the crop is the ring. Boxing, you have to modify your behavior in boxing technique to make the ring less favorable to your opponent's survivor. Like Ali. Ali was typically a more aggressive boxer, but he just played defense those first few rounds. And same thing with EPM, you modify your production schemes and techniques to make the crop environment less favorable for the pest colonization, survivor, as well as increase. Now in boxing, you minimize injury despite of being punched, right? If you're a boxer, you're gonna get punched. Ali got punched, but the idea is that you minimize loss in that fight. You're gonna get punched. Same thing with EPM. EPM is not meant to remove all pests from the cropping system. It's meant to reduce their numbers so that you don't have a significant yield loss. So the best thing when we think about EPM, these are the things you want to know. You want to understand the pest ecological record. What does that pest need to survive? You want to know how available they are. You want to know the location of the records. Because sometimes there are pests in your cropping system. Everything that needs to survive is not necessarily in that cropping system. Sometimes the things that it needs is outside of the cropping system, and you can attack them that way. And then you want to understand the pest behavior in attaining these records. So when we think about insects, these are just 4 of the things they need. It's probably not everything they need, but it's things that we can explore. One is shelter. They need shelter, whether it's from extreme weather conditions or shelter from their natural enemies. They also need appropriate physical environment. The space that they're in, it has to be habitable. And of course, they need nutrients. And a lot of times, that's why they're in the cropping system, because they need nutrients. But also keep in mind that not always all the nutrients they need are in that crop. So when we think about ecological strategy that we can utilize to support their Achilles heel, and I want to remind you what Achilles heel is again. It's just a small problem or weakness in a DNA system that can result in its failure. So we're looking for a weakness in these pests that can result in their failure. So one of the things is crop rotation, right? So crop rotation is the cornerstone of any pest management, whether you seeds, whether it's insects, whether it's weeds, crop rotation is the cornerstone. But it can work really well against insects, and especially when insects are monophagous. Monophagous mean basically they feed on one particular host plant. So basically what happens if you rotate that host plant out of that field, and they don't have the ability to, they don't have a lot of mobility, then they basically going to starve to death. Because some insects, they lay their eggs before the new crop is planted. Its anticipation is that that host plant is going to be there the next year. And if that feed station mobile, when we think things like nematodes, we rotate out that crop, they come up the next season thinking that their host plant is going to be there and it's not there, they're basically going to starve. And then there's things like change the physical environment. So here on the left, this is soybean that they call drill, means it's planted at really close spacing. That's probably a 6-inch spacing. And then on the right there, I guess, yeah, you're right. It's planted maybe 36-inch spacing. And there's several good things about this. One is that we know that one of the major insects that attack soybeans, the corn earworm, the females like to lay their eggs in open canopy. So what happens when you plant the soybeans close together? The canopy closes. So you have less of that female moth going in there laying eggs. The other thing what it does is that many of the caterpillar pests that are pests of soybeans, they're very vulnerable to entomopathogens. And entomopathogens are pathogens that specifically attack insects. And the ones that attack caterpillar pests, they're very vulnerable to are fungal pathogens. You know what they need? Humidity. So what happens when you have that closed canopy, especially if it's rain? There's a lot of humidity in there. So you may have an episode of outbreak of a fungal pathogen that goes in and wipes out the caterpillars. And it does the same thing for mice. Mice are also vulnerable to fungal pathogens. Rain, a lot of humidity, takes them out. But we can also think about weeds. You know what? One of the things weeds need is light and space. So what happens here? When this closes up, there's no light there. So if those weeds haven't gotten established before that canopy closed, they're not going to get established. So then this is another interesting story. This is a female diamondback moth, or male and female, I should say. So they're a terrible pest of brassica crops. And in Hawaii, one of the crops they like is watercress, which is grown on water. So you know what the weak length of them was? They discovered the males and females, they typically meet during the afternoon period, and that's what they mate. watercress is overhead irrigated. So they said, okay, if that's what you're gonna do, we're gonna turn on our irrigation during that time. It disrupted their ability to make, and that's how they control it. And it makes it feel less habitable. There are some insects that simply don't like their host plant when it's surrounded by non-host plant. They have a difficult time finding it, and sometimes even if they can find it, it's just not a comfortable environment. So they tend to migrate out of it. So here we have something like tomato in the crop with, I think that's coffee in the background, there's, banana, and some insects simply don't like that. So that's a way to reduce their colonization. So I'm gonna get some research examples where I actually sort of used this technique to learn about insects. And then what I learned, I used it against them to try to manage them. So I want to start off by the melon fly, and which is more of a tropical pest. So just to give you a background on melon fly, it's a serious pest of fruits and vegetable crops, especially cucurbits, such as melon, squash, and cucumber. The females, what we say they sting the plant, but that's just slang we use. They're not stinging a plant, they're ovipositing their eggs into the plant. And then the hatch is basically larva. If it's in a zucchini plant, it may tunnel through the plant, and then the plant just sort of split over. Or if the fruit is there, it lays the eggs in the fruit. If they hatch, you have a fruit with a lot of maggots in it.
Yeah.
So the idea was first for me to try to learn what I could use against the melon fly. So the first thing I knew is that I found out that the females, they enter the crop only to oviposit their eggs. They don't hang out there. They just go there to lay out their offsprings, and then that's it. For the adults, they like to chill out on tall vegetation. I said, okay, that's nice. And the adults, they're attracted to, and they like eating protein baits. I said, okay, I can certainly explore this. So basically what I did was, I found a really tall plant, sorghum Sudan grass. I surrounded it by the zucchini field, and then I baited it with a protein bait that was also splashed with an organic insecticide. And basically it controlled them.
Nice.
Just knowing that they like to hang out on vacation, so tall vegetation, and give them what they want. I'm going to give an example of small hive beetle. Now, before this project, I have, and still now, I know very little about honeybees. But again, it's just a matter of learning the weak link of whatever you're trying to target. So small hive beetle was something that we wanted to target for this particular program. Just to give some background, it's considered a secondary opportunistic pest. You don't hear a lot about this. They typically take advantage of colonies that are already stressed out. Otherwise, the bees can handle them themselves. They lay a large number of eggs. The eggs develop quickly. And again, if the comb is unprotected, stressed out, they basically just destroy it in a short period of time. So the first thing was try to learn the weak link of the small hive beetle. What did I find? Well, the larvae exit the hive to pupate in the soil, which meant that it's not just hanging around that beehive when they're ready to pupate, they drop out. I said, so that's what we should try to get them. And then the other thing is, I learned when they drop out, they don't move far away from that hive. The other thing, entomopathogenic nematodes love them. So entomopathogenic nematodes, these parasitic roundworms, you can see them here. And basically what they do is they sort of go into the body, they multiply, and then basically they split open. So basically what we did was we put a number of these entomopathic nematodes, we try to get them established right below the hive. So when they drop out, they try to go in the soil, and these guys were going to be there to get them. Well, it completely failed. And I wanted to show this failure for a reason. You know how I say it's very important to learn the ecology of the pest? Well, if you're trying to use natural enemies to attack their weak link, it's also very important to take into consideration their weak link. So the weak link of these entomopathogenic nematodes is they need moisture. It was a very dry spring. It was a very dry summer. We did not irrigate or water the soil. So basically they just didn't get very well established. Now, there are some instances where you may have two pests. It gets a bit tricky sometimes when you're trying to work with two pests. So in this case, we're talking about eggplant. And there's two major pests of eggplant. One is the flea beetle. And I kind of consider flea beetle outside fighters. If you haven't ever have a flea beetle problem, they sort of go and attack the plant and then they disappear. And you see all these holes in the plant. So that's why I call them outside fighters. And then, of course, you have the Colorado potato beetle, which is basically a swarmer. They lay the eggs on the plant, they hatch, and they just sit there and devour the plant. So the thing was, what were the weak links of these two things? Flea beetles was a little bit tough. But what I noticed about the flea beetle, most of their damage is early in the season. And you know why? They're small. So basically, when they're small and the plant is small and you have a lot to come in, they can basically just wipe out the plant. But if you can get past that early season of plant growth, it has no effect on the plant. Maybe benefit the plant because it puts little holes in it and the photosynthesis now can go to the lower part of the plant because it goes through the leaf. Now, the Colorado potato beetle, what I found is they like taking long walks. Now, they don't really like taking long walks. What happened with the Colorado potato beetle is that, especially if they have a harsh winter, they use a lot of their energy reserve is used just for survival. So when they come up, they don't have a lot of energy to get those flight muscles going. So they tend to walk to locate their host plant. Although some people say if they walk for a long period of time, eventually they can take flight. The other thing is, there's a number of predators out there that love feeding on Colorado potato beetle in mature stage. So basically what I said, well, what I did was, I did this intercropping system. So basically what this is crimson clover. I call it a dying mulch. And what I mean by dying mulch is that it starts out alive, right? But then it just naturally senesces on its own. And those little strips in there, those empty strips, that's where I planted my eggplant. So the idea was if this Colorado potato beetle comes up and it starts walking, wherever it's walking, it's gonna have a difficult time finding this eggplant surrounded by that crimson clover. Not only that, you know the other weakness of it, right? Going to natural enemies. There should be a lot in there. So they got to pass through all of that. If they get past those natural enemies, then they might be able to make it to the eggplant. Now, the idea was this is also a legume, crimson clover is a legume. And the idea is why I thought it might help me with the flea beetles is that one thing about the flea beetles, I can tell you, it will have no problem finding its host plant surrounded by non-host plant. This whole survival is based on that. They can have a plant, one particular host plant surrounded by thousands of plants and it will find it. So what I was hoping is that once I strip till in that legume, that will give that eggplant a boost when I plant and it can outgrow that early season injury. So when you think about what we had here, one was to reduce the failure of the eggplant to Colorado potato beetle colonization. And I succeeded there. What I found is that the number never reached this high level in the eggplant and that crimson clover compared to the bare ground eggplant. And also they were slow to find it. They were slow to find the eggplant. Now, the other thing was to try to reduce the impact of the flea beetle injury through more vigorous plant growth. There I failed. Because yes, the plants did grow bigger in that crimson clover, but it wasn't during the early part of the season. It didn't occur until around mid-season. And I needed to occur during the early part of the season. Also, to make that habitat more hospitable to predators. There we did. There were certainly more predators and specifically the ones that used the Colorado potato beetle as prey. So I gave myself a grade of D because I was a little bit disappointed that I didn't get this to work out. Now, there are some instances where not only you're trying to target two pests, but you may target a pest of different complexes. In other words, not two insects or not weeds, it may be insects and weeds or insect, pathogen or something. So this was the case with lima beans. And basic idea here, we were trying to control both nematodes, plant parasitic nematodes, which are roundworms that feed on the roots of plants. And then we also had the Mexican bean beetle. So now I'm trying to come up with a strategy in the same crop to target below ground pest and then something that's feeding on the foliage. So again, the first thing you do is try to find out something about their weak links. So the root knot nematode is a specific nematode that attacks lima beans. So the first thing I noticed was that, well, I sort of already knew this, is that they're not very mobile. So we know that crop rotation works very well, but the other thing is that root knot nematode, they have a wide host range. So sometimes crop rotation just doesn't do it. But the other thing is they're vulnerable to allelopathy, which meant there's a number of plants out there that you can grow, and out of the roots is producing a toxin that's toxic to the root knot nematode. So some of them, these plants, they produce that toxin while they're living, and some of them you have to till them in to release that toxin. And then we have the Mexican bean beetle. The Mexican bean beetle I found favors certain plants. So if they favor certain plants, then we can potentially use trap cropping, where you plant, you take the plant that you're trying to protect, or the crop you're trying to protect, and you surround it by something that particular pest likes better, so it attracts them away from the crop. And the other thing I found, what was reported, that the Mexican bean beetle disliked the odor of certain plants. So they are attracted to some plant and they dislike the odor of certain plants. So then I thought, well, I can try this strategy that I thought was pretty cool, that I always needed a system to try. And we call it the push-pull. So the push-pull tactic is when you have a pest, you have something that's trying to repel the pest out of the crop. And at the same time, you're trying to use something that is attracting them. So that's why they call it push-pull. So that repellent can be an odor, it may be just something that's masking the plant, but the idea is pushing that insect out of it. And then on the outside, you have something that they want. So you have both of these working at the same time. So these were the plants that I decided to work with. So I'll first start with marigold. And why marigold? Well,
They're pest control.
nematodes. This is
They're
one of the most toxic things, the root knot nematodes.
Ah.
Basically, as it's growing, it produces a exudate out of the root and it's toxic to nematode. And so this is one of those ones that you don't kill in. It's producing that toxin as it's growing. But just by luck, and it was really luck, no skills of mine, guess what? This plant was also reported to be repellent to the Mexican bean beetle. So this was perfect for me. So then I decided to use snap beans. So why snap beans? The Mexican bean beetle likes snap beans better than lima beans. Is there anyone here who eats lima beans and snap beans? Can you taste the difference? Oh, you can. Do you like snap beans better? Do you like white snap beans better?
No. I don't know.
But that's the case. I found that, I looked at a lot of studies where I found that Mexican bean beetle would go to snap bean better than lima beans. Not only that, they really love wax snap beans. Now, one of the reasons why I asked if anyone here likes the snap beans better than lima beans, because in some instances, this is kind of on the side, but in some instances, insects tend to have the same taste buds that humans have. Like there was an example where this farmer was trying to grow this cabbage, and it was just always being attacked by the dieback moth. So someone said, why don't you grow this cabbage? Because they don't like it. The farmer grew that cabbage and it worked perfectly. Couldn't sell it. None of the humans liked it. And that happened so many times. So getting back to this. So basically what I did, I set up these two treatments. So the white circles up here, that represents lima beans. And then down here, you have the white circles, lima beans. I put in my, the squares there is the marigold. And then on the outside is my wax snap beans.
Nice.
And then this is what we found. We found there was greater Mexican bean beetle in the push-pull border, which meant they were attracted to the wax snap beans. The other thing we found, there was a great number of predators in the intro area of the push-pull. And you know why? The benefit of the marigold, it also attracted natural enemies. Now, we didn't think about that at the beginning, but it made sense because it was producing those flowers, and those flowers attract natural enemies. And for that same reason, it also attracted a number of parasitors. Because the parasitors, they need nectar as a food source. The flower and marigold served as that nectar. And some of those parasitors that we found are the same ones that oviposit inside of the immature stage of the Mexican bean beetle. So that was kind of an added benefit of it all. So let's move to the harlequin bug.
Oh, boy.
Yeah, right. Harlequin bug has no weak links. It's one of the most toughest things. But the one thing that I found is that egg stage is very vulnerable to parasitism. There are a number of wasps that will oviposit their eggs in the harlequin bug. The problem is those wasps don't like brassica crops, so they won't go to brassica crops. So the only reason I was able to discover this is that sometimes insects would lay their eggs in a plant they shouldn't. So on occasion, a harlequin bug would lay its egg on soybeans or edamame, which is vegetable soybeans. There's a lot of stink bug parasitoids in soybeans. And this is a stink bug, the same family, Pentatomidae. So when I find it, every single time when I find an egg mass in soybean, it's always parasitized, 100%. But they simply would not go into brassica crops. So I said, you know what? I'm gonna outsmart it. So basically what I did was, I intercropped the broccoli with the edamame. The idea was this parasitoid is gonna be searching that edamame. So if that's the case, it absolutely will go on the broccoli. It's already in system. That was the idea. They would go in there. Nope,
They did it.
they refused. Still refused. Still refused. So, and when you go to check the stink bug eggs, they was out there with parasitizing, the harlequin bugs, because they were in that brassica crop, those parasitoids simply will not go in there. Now, I'm 100% certain that if I would have taken an egg mass and put it up there, they would have parasitized it. But apparently, there's something about the smell of broccoli those parasitoids don't like. And then this is an instance here where we have a phytotoxemia. Now, phytotoxemia is simple. It's not a disease, but sometimes insects feed on a plant and the plant has a negative response to the feed, and it's not a disease. So this one is called Cerruti, and it's caused by whitefly feeding. Whitefly, they feed on it and it turns a silver color. So the thing was to learn, what is it about the whiteflies? What are their weak links? So what I found was only the immature stage is called silverleaf. It's not the adults. It's only the immature stage. So I said, okay, that's where we have to target. The other thing, severity is linked to plant size. So basically, if you have a large plant, you can have a large number of feet on that plant doesn't turn silver. So this particular research was done in Hawaii. And the thing about Hawaii is they have a lot of trade winds all the time. And the trade wind beats these plants. And when it beats these plants, they grow very slow. So they're very vulnerable for a period of time. So basically what we did was we intercropped the small plants. They're very small now, so you won't see them, but we intercropped it with sun hemp. Why? Sun hemp formed a nice windbreak. That's basically all it was doing, because the whitefly is something like the flea beetle. They're gonna find their host plant. You can't hide it from them. So if we could form this windbreak, the plant grow larger, it can withstand a higher number of whitefly feet and it would turn silver. And what we found was just that. When we did the intercropping, we did sun hemp, we did buckwheat, we also intercropped with okra, and we grew it in bare ground with no intercropping. And what we found that the whitefly numbers were similar in all those cities, which is what we expected. But there was less symptoms in the sun hemp. And basically when we did our measurements, we found that the plants were larger at an early stage in the sun hemp. So it worked very well as a windbreak. Now, it didn't work very well in buckwheat. We did terrible in buckwheat. The reason is that we had the buckwheat too close. So it caused the plants to be smaller. So they actually had more symptoms. So now let's kind of switch gears, and let's talk about disease, because this concept you can use for whatever. So in this case, we were trying to control a virus. And this was what we call a non-persistent aphid transmitted virus. So some insects are capable of transmitting disease. These aphids can transmit a virus. And the reason why we call it non-persistent virus, it's not circulating in their body. It's just on their mouth part. That's it, just on the tip of the mouth part. So first, before I go into the mechanism, again, just like, you know, in insects, when I told you these records that it's needed. So it's important to know why the disease need for it to occur, and this is what it requires. First, it has to be a susceptible host, because not all plant disease will attack all plants. Some of them are very specific. Also, you have to have a favorable environment. I was talking about fungal pathogens. If fungal pathogens occur, a lot of times it requires humidity. And also you need a pathogen. So we call this the plant disease triangle. And the idea here is that all of these factors are necessary for a disease to occur. So you can try to prevent that disease from knocking out any of these. So let's go back to the non-persistent virus. So one thing it requires, the pathogen itself requires a vector. In other words, that pathogen isn't just floating around and lands on the plant. It requires an insect to transmit it. So it requires a vector, which meant that maybe we can target that vector. And then the vector is the aphid. So what are the weak links in the aphid? Well, one is they contrast the plant with the soil background. Basically what this means is when that aphid is flying over, it needs a lot of background soil to try to recognize its host plant. It's contrast that green plant to soil background. Also, the aphid tend to do a test probe. When they land on a plant, they're not sure that it's a host plant, so they do a little test probe with their mouth part. So I said, basically for this, we can use the same system that we use to control the whitefly. And basically we use those same plants. What we did was we intercrop the zucchini with buckwheat, the okra, and also the sunhemp. You notice what you don't see here? Bare ground. That's what they need. There's a very little bare ground there. But then again, you can see what I meant by we made it too close and why the plants were small. But basically what happened was we had a reduction of disease plant in all the intercropping system. Now, the other thing we did, we tested this in the lab, because what we found in the field is that the buckwheat worked best, followed by sunhemp, followed by okra. And then, of course, the worst was the bare ground. So we tested in the lab, and the way we tested in the lab was that we would take an aphid, we put them on the diseased zucchini plant, and then we put them on one of our intercrop plants, and then we put them on the clean zucchini plant. And we tested their ability to transmit the virus. And what we found in the lab is the same what we saw in the field, that buckwheat cleaned their mouth part the best, followed by sunhemp, followed by okra. So now let's go to weeds. So what are the things that weeds need for survival or establishment? Well, they need light, they need water, they need space, and of course they need nutrients. So again, it's almost like the plant disease triangle. If you can try to attack any of these, then basically you can sort of reduce the competitiveness of weeds with your cropping system. So one of the things I work with a lot is cover crops. And so we were trying to think of a technique using cover crop to suppress weeds and sweet corn. And basically I used two different cover cropping strategies. So the idea here is we plant this winter cover crop. And what we did was we planted a combination of this is red clover, this is perennial, and this is cereal rye. So basically we planted that during the fall, and then in the spring, before we plant our sweet corn, we went in there with the rhodocrempin. And basically what the rhodocrempin does is it rolls down that rye. It's not gonna damage the red clover. This is perennial. And then when you think about what happens here is that these are all the records that weeds need. So if you think about that red clover, it's taking away light, it's taking away water, it's taking away space, it's taking away nutrient. So we're not gonna get any weeds in that between row area because it's taking all the resources that the weeds. Now the rye is not living, so it's not gonna be taking up water, it's not gonna be taking up nutrient, but it's taking away light and space. Now eventually it's gonna break down. But the idea is all you need to do is keep those weeds at bay until that corn comes up tall and forms a nice canopy, and then it's going to defend for itself. So now I'm just going to finish up by talking about some of the advantage and limitation, because it's not always great technique. So some of the advantages, if it works to reduce pesticides use. It's very hospitable to natural enemies. It's harmonious with other management approaches. In other words, you don't just have to rely on it. It's also compatible with whether you're an organic farmer or using conventional farming. And as you can saw during that particular earlier, you can sometimes target multiple pests, multiple pest complexes with a single tactic. It's usually cheap to implement. It's ecologically friendly generally. And it doesn't make condition worse. So it can fail, but what I found out when it failed, it doesn't make condition worse. But you think about if you use an insecticide and it failed, it actually can make conditions much worse. And the reason is that many times it's the natural enemies that are more vulnerable to the parasitic, to the pesticide. So you use it, it doesn't work on the pest, but it wipes out the natural enemy. And then you have a pest that wasn't a pest that becomes a pest because the natural enemy was keeping it at bay and you didn't know it was a pest. So some of the limitation is this: the biology of the pest should be understood. You actually have to do research to learn that weak link. And insects can change their behavior. You think they can change their behavior? No.
Yeah.
Some yes, some no. Well, let's talk about the diamondback moth. Remember that diamondback moth? They used to get together during the afternoon and have their little mating ritual, and they would turn on the water. Well, it stopped working. So what do you think happened? Do you think they're saying, you know what? Someone, they were sitting around the corner and watching and said, ha, they're turning on the water during the afternoon. You know what? Let's just start meeting in the morning. So they changed their behavior. You think that's what happened?
Yeah.
It was selection pressure. Basically what happened is the majority of them were mating during that particular period, but you had some small population that were mating at a different time. Right? And they kept turning on the water. So that population that mates during the afternoon, their population started going down. Meanwhile, the few that was mating during the odd time, their population started increasing. All of a sudden, they had an explosion again to stop over. So it's mainly selection pressure. Also, it is a preventive tactic. So basically, it's trying to prevent pest population. If you have high numbers, it's nothing that you can, you not necessarily use this technique. Also, it has to work within grower priority. Things such as intercropping 2 plants or, it may not be convenient for a grower to have to try to manage 2 plants at the same time. And also you have new practices and techniques that may make EPM tactics obsolete. Because one of the weak links of some of the pests, I say sometimes, especially the ones that like to go into dipods within that same field. But one of the things farmers could do was they would till the field, bring them up to the surface. When they bring them up to the surface during the winter, basically they just freeze to death. And now we're into conservation tillage, so we tend to not do that anymore. And then this, sometimes you do everything right and it simply does not work. It's just like when I intercropped edamame, I said, this is perfect. This is gonna put me on a map. This is gonna be a great paper. And nothing, completely failed. So sometimes, although it should work, it just doesn't, and you don't know why. Also, there's no instructions. So in using this technique, it's up to you to research that particular pest and see what can I use against it. When you think about a pesticide, everything you need is on that label. It tells you how much water to add, how much you need to apply, what it targets, when to apply. All that information is there, but there's no instructions for ecological pest management. You look up the particular pest, you find a weak link, then you come up with something. So again, I'm hoping after this presentation, you're a better boxer. Think you're a better boxer? Raise your hand. You think you have a greater knowledge of EPM? All right, well, thank you. So that's the thing. So the theme of that is that sometimes this happens to me a lot. Someone will say, they just tell me a particular pest and they say, how do I control this? And I think, You know what? I would have to research to learn about it. Then I can tell you.
But you said with the edamame, it did not work. Were you able to think of something else that will work?
I didn't try, because the important thing, the reason why that should have worked is that because, or why I didn't think of another plant is because edamame attracts a lot of stink bug parasitoid, and that's what the pelican bug is most vulnerable to. So I couldn't, so my thoughts were any other plant I use basically is going to even if it's attractive, they're still not gonna grow that grass and flower. Only thing I could think of that could have been occurred is that if we had a population, just one, at least one parasitoid female would have went onto that brassica crop and parasitized those eggs, and then we could have started rearing those eggs, and we came up with a population that now we rear a population that will go, and they pass that on to the next generation. That's the only thing I could have thought of.
Yes, you mentioned, the French marigold, to attract, certain pests. The other types of marigolds, would they do the same thing or they would not work?
Different marigolds. Yeah, because French marigold is very particular.
Okay,
So yeah, marigold, it is a difference. It definitely is a difference. Some
Yeah.
works better than others. And
okay.
it's not they attract pests. Basically, the marigold it's a real pathogen, the nematodes that lotus soil, and is reported to be repellent to a number of pests. So it's more of a repellent.
Repellent. okay.
Yeah. And then it attracts natural enemies mainly because of the flower. The parasitic wasp likes to go into the flower to feed. And sometimes what they find is that it enhances their longevity and their fecundity, which meant they live longer and they can lay more eggs inside of a host plant, inside of their host.
Okay.
What role does things like netting, play into this? Like, from one aspect, it might help keep some of the pests out, but then it might also keep some of the, predators out too, right?
Yeah, but typically for netting, it's more so to keep the pest out. And basically what you're doing is, the idea is that if some sneak in there, it's almost like the boxing, he's gonna get hit, but you just try to reduce it so that it doesn't get knocked out. And that's the idea. Yes, you may have some pests get under that netting, but it should keep the number down so low that they're not gonna have an impact. The tricky thing with the netting is that if you have that crop that requires the pollination, and once you lift it up, they can come in. Sometimes again, what happens is that even if that happens, maybe the plant is large enough that if they come in, they're not gonna be damaging, or either that those pests they've already colonized other areas.
Okay, good to know. So rely on it heavier in the early days of the plants, it sounds
And
like.
the important thing is to know when that pest is arriving, when they're coming out of diapause, and that's when you say, okay, this is the time I need to put it up.
Makes sense.
And it's almost like trap crop. Trap crop is again, that technique where you grow a plant that attracts the insect, more so than the one that he likes that plant better than the one you're trying to protect. And sometimes even with trap cropping, you can use that technique by using the plant that you want to grow anyway. The idea is that sometimes it's not that first generation that does the damage, it's their offspring. So say you say, well, I normally plant my crop in June, but I know they're coming out of diapause in May. So I'm just gonna sacrifice some in May, but you have to control them. And you wipe out that overwintering, that diapausing stage, and then when you plant your next crop, there's not as many that can colonize that plant. And again, it's based on learning their weak link is when are they coming out? And I'm just gonna give it to them and then I'm gonna somehow kill them off.
Have you done any research or have any approaches for the squash vine borer?
Well, that's another tough.
You gotta come on, guys.
I think, but it seems like the squash vine borer is their vulnerability is they're susceptible to, I think, the parasitism of the eggs, I believe. Actually, adults too. I think what happens with adults, I think there's a fly, a Kennet fly that lays this, and all you're gonna say, oh, that's terrible. But the fly lays its eggs on the outside of the body, it hatches,
And they eat it.
go inside, eats the inside, and then comes out.
Yeah, it's like payback. I'm ready to do my spot.
But that one is, it's really tough. That one is really tough because, and even for people who use insecticide, the traditional farm, it's tough because they can hide below the plants, their
Yeah.
eyes on the ground.
Yeah.
But I believe that someone is, maybe USDA are doing some releases where they're trying to release the parasitoid. And basically the idea is that those parasitoids are always gonna be around. And once the parasitoids get the population down, then they sort of keep it suppressed, each year. But that's another tough one.
I had a question about when you mentioned some of like, you can't really anticipate what kind of selection pressures you're gonna introduce. If you're someone, let's say you're like a beginning farmer or even an experienced farmer and you want to implement some of these strategies or you do your own research, what are like some of the proper channels you should be going through to make sure you're not like having these unintended consequences, whether it's just for yourself or like your surrounding environment or for other people nearby you, that sort of thing? Like, is something you should, or someone, or just is there a channel you should be going through to try to get feedback or help with implementing these things?
But a lot of times it's just that, like what they noticed in Hawaii, it just stopped working. And once you notice it stopped working, you know, there was some sort of selection pressure. A lot of times you can't anticipate it. Sometimes it doesn't happen. And sometimes the way to prevent it from happening is again, I say EPM is just a component of IPM. Like use IPM, which meant you throw as many tools at them as possible, then they're not, it makes it more difficult for them to overcome any one management tactic. So if you use the same tactic over and over, you may have a selection pressure, but the thing is, you switch your tactic or you use multiple tactics at the same time. And that's what helps with that selection pressure.
Lawan had a comment online about marigolds. I don't know, Lawan, if you wanted to voice your comment or have me just read it.
Marigolds attracted a lot of moths for me and Lori this year. Didn't commit.
Yeah, that's a lot of moms.
That means your marigold is serving as a pollinator habitat. How would you say that's bad? It's only bad if those moths that it's attracting are also being a pest of your crop. So I would say attracting a lot of moth is not necessarily bad, again, unless those moths that is attracted are they use that marigold as a food source and then they're going to land their eggs in your crop.
Thanks for the comment, Lawan.
But it's the type of marigold also, if you're using,
I had like 3 different marigolds. I had the Cracker Jacks, a mixed bunch of marigolds, and the African marigolds. And that was, I just moved here this year, so this is my first year gardening in this area. It was a lot of changes from Greenbelt. The climate here is cooler as well, and it's more windy. But it just was a lot of moths, like a lot of moths.
I would think crackerjack was also attracting a lot of bumblebees. Is that true? Or you just, because of the moth, you just didn't care about the bumblebees?
No, the bees were definitely here too. I love the bees being here too, but I just was worried about the moths.
No, I wouldn't worry about the moth. The other thing is that the greatest benefit of the marigold you won't see, and that's when it's attracted that tiny parasitic wasp, and you would never notice that. So of course, you're gonna see the moth because they're large. People see the bumblebees because they're large. So they don't realize how much it's attracting those parasitic wasps. And that's what you want. Those are the ones that are going into your field and overdeposit their egg inside the different stages of insects. It could be the egg stage, the larva stage, or the adult stage. But again, I wouldn't worry about the moth thing.
The bee that you're talking about, is that really teeny tiny? Bump, like it's a wasp, but it's like really small,
Really
like,
small.
like, small. Like-
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Yeah, I had a lot of those.
Earlier, you talked about intercropping buckwheat and sunhemp. That's the first, second stage, and then planting zucchini. Were you also saying okra?
Yeah, okra, we tried, let me think. Oh, I remember why I added okra into the mix. I added okra into the mix because okra attracts aphids. So I thought okra could benefit as both a trap crop for the aphid and also serve as the term we use is called protector plant. And a protector plant is basically a plant that an insect will probe, it's the insect that transmits a virus. And a protected plant is a plant they will probe where they can release that virus, and basically the plant doesn't, the plant is not a host of the virus. So we thought the okra could serve both as even if the aphids probe it, they may just stay there because it's a nice host plant, they wouldn't bother with the zucchini. But even if they probe it, they can still wash their mouth out of that virus. So that's why okra was being used.
And then the okra can still be harvested
Oh, yes.
and sold?
Oh, yes.
Oh.
Yes. Yeah, we got a lot of free watermelon because of okra. I don't like okra. The graduate student didn't like okra, but we did it on a farm and there was a lot of Filipinos on the farm. And okra isn't something that's grown a lot in Hawaii. So we were like, everyone loved us, so we would take them to okra and they would give us the watermelon.
Thank you.
We have time for maybe one more question for Cerruti. Oh, we'll do two, Linda and Tracy.
It's Linda, you can have my question. I'll just ask it after.
No, it's fine.
I'll do both.
We can do both.
Okay, do you have a newsletter that you send out monthly regarding bugs or pests that we need to look for within this area, or any tips?
Normally extension do that.
Yeah.
What's it called?
Yeah, I'm on that list.
Fruit and vegetable headline news?
No, I'm not on that list. I'm on a different list.
No, fruit and vegetable headline news, that's the best one.
Okay, thank you.
And the person you would contact is to get on that list is Emily Zobel. Zobel, Emily Zobel.
You can reach
email
out to
her.
me and I can send it to you.
Okay.
Yeah, and
Say
then
that
she,
again? And then what?
Emily Zobel. It's
No, no.
called, I think it's called Fruit and Vegetable Headline News or Vegetable and Fruit News or something like that. But you contact Emily because they changed the name of it. And a lot of times what they do is they give you a head up that there's something on the rise.
There you go. Email, phone number.
Oh, my question was, I tried this and other people have mentioned this too about the migrating patterns of the squash bugs and planting your squash later in the season. And have to eliminate a lot of those, pests and that curve family. Have you ever tried anything like that? That made a significant difference in anything?
No, I don't think they're so mobile, that's a little bit different.
Yeah. I've tried everything. But, I did find that planting, multiple successions of they might come out at a certain point and attack. And then the others are starting to come up and maybe because they're young, they prefer the more mature. So then I'm kind of sacrificing our earlier crop. And that mid one might make it longer so that if it does attack it later, it's already produced enough, but then I got another one coming up. So it's just like, you gotta just keep planting.
Yeah, that was a little bit.
They all eventually succumb, but I usually like the middle plantings, I get more fruit from them before they.
Yeah, the problem with down is the ideal situation for down is crop rotation, but it's distant crop rotation. And people don't always have the land for distant crop rotation. In other words, all your land is in one area. So you say, oh, my field is here, I'm gonna just move it here. And to them, that's nothing. Unfortunately. Yeah, but I need to work on that parasite for those natural enemies. Yeah. But sometimes, if you can get those guys going, then they can take care of the situation.
Thank you so much,
Sure.
Rudy. information is up here. There's a link to his website as well, where he posts various things. Oh, thank you for this. So I'll leave that up for a minute, while Miss Julie makes her way. Yeah, go ahead to the front, and then I'll pull up a slide for you as well. Thanks again, Cerruti.
Yeah, you're welcome.
All right. Pull up here.
Hey, I'm Julie. Did everybody not get a handout? Can we just pass them around and take one if you want? So I'm Julie and I'm fairly new with the county and we have money to give out to farmers. So, of course, everyone's interested. I'm just gonna be really brief. So my email is on the back at the bottom, on the bottom of the back side of this handout. Please contact me if you have questions. The short story of this is the USDA has Inflation Reduction Act money left to promote climate smart agriculture. Prince George's County received some of that money. And the USDA's goal, of course, is climate smart agriculture, which is our goal, but the county also wants to really promote local food security and the success of our local farmers. So we're trying to combine those two goals. So there's the handout up there too. And I also wanted to mention, well, there's a lot of details. Because this has some science associated with it and a lot of measurements and a lot of reporting, I am here to work with everyone who's interested. So there's a lot of paperwork, but I'm here to help. So you just need to contact me. There's another organization that's larger than us called PASA, which is the Pennsylvania Sustainable Agriculture Association. And they also have one of these grants and they're serving like the whole Eastern Seaboard. You can find them at climatesmart.org if you're interested. But for small to medium-sized farmers, we probably have more money to offer for your area. But there's money around, so I want everyone to get what they need if possible. So what we're trying to do is we're trying to support local farmers who are willing to give us a 3-year commitment to do their best to grow using climate smart techniques on on what we agreed to grow. And that's about it. It's a lot more complicated than that, but in just a few minutes I have, why don't I just answer questions? Chris, you had your hand up first, I think.
So I've reached out to PASA before and I've attended a couple of their webinars. And I've asked, since I'm here in Maryland, will they service us? They said no, their primary concern is Pennsylvania growers and not Marylanders.
How recent was that?
Like last month or September.
Oh, they've already signed up at least 5 growers in Prince George's County. So,
maybe I'm in the wrong room.
it could be, you know, if you go to climatesmart.org, that will take you to their description of their application. So I should also say, because we're the county, I'm dealing with both county and federal bureaucracy. We don't have our application up online yet, but I do have it in hard copy or Word fillable. So you just have to email me and I can send you that information. What else did I want to tell you? So I think, oh, I forgot your name, but
Tracy.
ask your question.
So what do you mean what we agree to grow?
As we fill out your application, you're gonna tell me what you're interested in
Oh,
growing.
good.
And then we're gonna figure out together what kind of practices would have the most kind of climate bang for the buck of your operation. Does that make sense? So we're wanting to maximize your impact on climate, which is different for Prince George's County than a lot of the farms across the country, because we're unique here. But also we want to impact our food security and we want to impact your market. So a big part of this grant from the USDA is working on marketing, both in terms of getting better prices for local food, but also kind of getting markets more secure. And so for me, what that means is not just having you continue to sell at farmers markets or however you're selling, but eventually to get more local produce, more steady supply so that we can start breaking into like more regular supermarkets and stuff. Eventually, we just want to really solidify ag. Tracy, and then
One more question.
of course.
obviously you give money for seeds and other things, but what about infrastructure? Because my next thing is a greenhouse.
This money is not to do it's not to purchase or construct anything. This is an incentive for you to make this agreement with us. So if you're awarded this money, you don't have to bookkeep it or report to us what you did with it. It's just for you to use to solidify your business. So it's kind of a nice deal. It's not for you to say, construct this hoop house. It's for you to get your business off the ground or expand your business. So it's fairly different. And our hope before the election was that this might continue in the future, but whether or not it does, we can use this to do some permanent help for us. One more question,
Yes,
Tracy,
so
and then I'll-
therefore you want us to apply before January.
So, yes, thank you. I should mention the schedule really quick. So
Yeah.
I'm accepting what I'm calling intention to apply information now. From January 15th to February 15th, we'll be accepting formal applications, which isn't that formal, but if you talk to me now, then we can decide, do you need to get your FSA number if you haven't gotten that yet? Do you want to do a practice that's going to need environmental review? A lot of the things with trees and forestry will need extra review. What other paperwork do we need? Do you need the beginning farmer class that Extension is offering from February through April that Kim just shared by email? So that's what we want to arrange now so that nobody's scrambling. And also, if you email me and I send you the full package, you'll see there's a lot of climate impacts and co-benefits. That's really my specialty, but it's not everyone's specialty. So I'm not expecting you to all of a sudden become an expert overnight. I'm expecting us to work together and get really creative on what we can do to both help you, help the climate, and help our residents get more food. Good, healthy, local food. So who had the next
It was
question?
me, but it was whether it was renewable until you already answered it.
Possibly, but
Yeah.
it's not looking likely
Yeah,
at this
I
point. Yeah. Our thought is if we don't give all the money out this year, we'll have another round the same time next year. So, we're gonna try not to leave anybody behind. Yes.
I have three questions and one is hopefully really fast. Is it reimbursement based? It sounds like no.
No, once we decide how much we want to award, which is ultimately based on your producing area plus any other area that has practices, it'll be 75% up front and 25% at the middle or end of the third year. So we're hoping to really get you where you need to be. You had two other questions?
Yeah. I'll do the faster one. What's the earliest date we could possibly receive funding based on the schedule?
This is a pilot and judging by the fact that I have not been able to get our application online as a PDF, give us some leeway, but our finance people have already met with us and they're prepared that if we have all of our paperwork in place and we do everything correctly, they're hoping to get payment out within 30 days. So we're thinking this, early to mid-spring is what we're hoping to do once we've selected people who are awarded. But we do ask, that you recognize that this is our first time doing something like this and things happen. So don't, go out and sign a contract for something where you're waiting. Give us a little bit of grace. Period.
Last one, and I'll make it quick.
Yeah.
How does this interact with other cost share programs like NRCS and stuff at the state level?
Very good question. You can't double dip. So we would not want to pay for you to do any practice that on the same land twice. But we do have a suite of practices available. So there's room in there to work. Does that answer that question?
Yes, thank you.
How many grant awards do you expect to make this year?
It's flexible. We have a total of 2.25 million.
Okay.
Some of that is gonna pay smaller incentives. And then, we have a different cap for new growers or established growers. But within there, it's area based. So somewhere between, if we give out if everyone here got a 50K grant, I think we have enough for 40. but it's gonna vary depending on people's areas and how many. And if you're a new grower, that can go as high as 100K, but it's capped based on your area and your practice. So it's a decent. I have a couple questions. The first one is, it sounds like this is for the individual. Is it for individuals or for a business level? It's both. It's anyone who's really able to bring food or some of the other commodities we mentioned to market, or if you're supplying it to like schools or something where you're getting paid to provide that food. So we're not targeting home, hobby growers like me, unless I was really gonna take it. My yard is a little too small, but if we're targeting people who are really gonna be serious and give an honest 3-year effort, we're not gonna punish anybody if, say, you get to your first summer and it's brutal and it's awful and you just can't do it. But our goal is we're really looking for people who have done their homework or are prepared to do their homework and wanna work with us to really succeed and stick around the county and grow food. So that includes businesses, it can be nonprofits, but some of the details get a little fuzzy. Yes, you had another. It was just that, I know there's no farm size requirement. Is there a requirement about whether you own or lease your land?
Nope. But if you lease, the owner has to sign, what's the number of the form? There's
Like a landowner.
There's a landowner agreement form that has to be part of the package. That shouldn't, we have the form and it shouldn't be a big barrier. Let's come back to you because you already went. You two had questions.
Do you have to farm at the same property all 3 years, or what if you were like expanding and gonna have another farm location somewhere in there?
That's a good question. I don't know. We might need to talk more about your situation. There's a lot that's possible, but we'll have to talk more.
I didn't ask you the question, but I do now. What if you're leasing land that's owned by the county?
That's a good question. I think if the county's already leasing it to you specifically to garden, like as an incubator, that shouldn't be a problem, but we'll need to talk more. Yeah, everyone's gonna have to just bear with me because I'm coming from science and I'm like, bureaucracy. Best we can. And thank you. Chris,
Okay, thank you so much. You might have mentioned this already with CASA, but what about with CASA, the Chesapeake, shoot?
yeah, CASA is not a recipient of this grant, while CASA is. So that's the difference. CASA is offering other stuff and they're great. Is CASA affiliated with CASA? I can't keep all these acronyms straight. So those are other things. And just like with the other things that NRCS might give you money for, it's kind of slightly separate where we just won't double up.
Yeah.
Does that
Yeah,
make
because I've reached out to Lisa Garfield already about CASA, and basically the latest response I received from her is because they're still hiring technical assistants. Anything underneath that program is kind of on hold until they.
Got it.
Yeah.
I think this is all a little bit rushed because of the way that the Inflation Reduction Act money is needing to be used up in a timely manner. So, we'll just do the best we can and bring it.
Can you state your email again?
Oh, yes, it's on the back of this blue and white form at the bottom. It's jwolf at the very bottom in bold, co.pg.md. CO is for county, PG, Prince George's, Maryland, US. And I have some cards too. Did everyone get a form who wants one?
Yes.
Are they still around? Cool. Any other questions so that we can get out in a timely manner? I'm really excited that you're all interested. Yes.
Is this only for soil-based practices, or can you do hydroponics, aquaponics?
We have a list of practices. There's mulching and aquaponics is also on the list. Hydroponics is not. For agrivoltaics and aquaponics, those are both kind of experimental still, so that's gonna take more environmental review, but they are in our list. And then we also have some agroforestry practices, quite a few relating to hydrology, like if you're on a stream and you want to put in a stream buffer. So we have a range, and I can
I don't know if they're listed on this form, we probably ran out of space, so I can send you another, doc that has the full list.
Yeah, awesome, thank you.
Okay, so yeah, just email me for more information and, any other questions? I'm here to help and let's do some good ag together.
Before we depart, I just wanted to mention, we're gonna be updating our website. If you, this is sort of just a quick screenshot. All the way to the right is resources. I have it circled there. There's gonna be a tab here for financial assistance opportunities, so we'll be
Nice.
linking Julie's program here. We'll have our regular EQIP, which is Environmental Quality Incentives Program through NRCS, and Conservation Stewardship Program. Those will be linked here. Also, to make it really confusing for everyone, we have two resource conservation partnership program, RCPP. You'll hear that spoken of. There are two groups in the area that are serving urban farmers in the state of Maryland that are also, all these are the same practices, just the payment rates are a little bit different. So I'm just mentioning it to you all because it really behooves you to pay attention to what the rates are for each of the programs. And the stipulations. Julie has a lot of flexibility in hers. Hers are gonna be more focused on and NRCS has a whole suite of programs. Then they have one that's specifically called the Climate-Smart, CSAC, Climate-Smart Agriculture and Forest Activities, something like that. So they're targeting very specific practices through the Climate-Smart Commodities Program. But then there may be other ones you want to do that maybe aren't targeted through this program, but you could do through NRCS's traditional program or through one of the partners that's involved with RCPP. I think one's Sustainable Chesapeake, I think is the name of the one group, and the other is like Million Acre Challenge and Future Harvest. I think they're the other ones.
Yeah, there's a lot of last minute money out there right now. This is the time.
So we're gonna try to get it up there so you can make contact with folks and figure out which opportunity is best for you. But the nice thing about this one is Julie's right here. She lives in the county, she works in the county, so, easy for her to get to your farms.
Yes.
And we're happy to come with Julie too, because I know we're working with a lot of you and kind of bridge the gap between what you're currently doing and what you're gonna do with Julie.
Thank
I'm very
you.
excited about.
Thank you. Thanks, everyone.
Do we have any last minute questions for our folks online? Feel free to just come off mute.
I want all of that information.
No, this was great though, and I'm so excited about that grant.
Yay, we've already been in touch. Yeah.
Well, thank you, Luan, and thank you, Rick.
Yes, definitely I emailed you.
All right, so we're gonna go ahead and stop the recording.
So, yeah, I think like a lot of the.
Thank you.